Now, growing up with the internet into adulthood, I've always been fascinated with the mysterious of the world and the less talked about mediums. And as of late, especially with lost media. Lost media can be defined as, well, it's literally in the name, lost media, that being art, books, film, really abstract commercials that people can't remember. There's a lot, and I mean a lot of lost media out there. And when it comes to anime, there's quite a few. But in today's video, of course fitting the themes of this channel, or at least the anime I like to talk about most on here, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. And yes, JoJo's does have some lost media. That lost media, of course, being the 2007 film JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Phantom Blood, made by Studio. Technically, it's an acronym, so I should be saying APPP, but I'm just gonna call them app for the rest of the video because that's way too long. But I will say their full name, being another pushpin company, is pretty badass, I'm not gonna lie. So for the literal casual audience, what the hell is the Phantom Blood movie? Well, to give some Araki lore here, by this time in 2007, Araki has been making manga for over 25 years, and JoJo's has been existing for 20 years. So the Phantom Blood movie was produced to commemorate these anniversaries. And a PS2 game based on the Phantom Blood manga would also be produced, fitting into the whole category of a promotional game for a movie that a lot of films had in the early 2000s. And the cast and credits for this movie are pretty stacked, at least in my opinion. Since this is the same studio that did the Stardust Crusaders OVA, it has a lot of potential to be pretty good, or at least visually speaking. And a name I would like to point out would be Junichi Hayama. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I hope. Do not roast me in the comments section, please. And he would of course be famous for a lot of the Stardust Crusaders OVA shots and just overall look, and a lot of the Fist of the North Star anime adaptations, which, funny enough, to bring Araki back up again, would probably be one of the more inspiring things for at least the first part of JoJo, as of course Araki was a pretty big fan of Fist of the North Star. And if you were to look at Kenshiro and Jonathan, they look pretty awfully similar, and there are a lot of, plot details that do kind of cross over between both respective franchises. So technically here we have gone full circle, at least within the context of this movie and the first part of JoJo's, which is really weird and pretty cool to think about. So I hope the idea of an anniversary movie being directed by a Fist of the North Star animation director under the ideas of the first part of JoJo's to commemorate both Araki and the franchise in general is really intriguing. Because for a lot of modern day JoJo fans that are pretty hardcore with a franchise like myself, this is a really goddamn cool idea. Like, this is genuinely something I would like to watch. And they really tried to promote this movie. There is a lot of promotional artwork for this movie, literally everywhere. You can go to Twitter or even the JoJo wiki to find them. And of course, there being the two pilots and events. Of course, the 2004 Tokyo International pilot, that of course would have some changes, and the Phantom Blood PS2 event, which would show some trailers and stuff. So if I have somehow sold you for this movie and you are hyped to watch it, if it ever comes out, what happens? Where's the crash? You're probably gonna say. Unsurprisingly, this movie had a very limited theatrical release in Japan, meaning that it did technically financially fail. And since it also was a limited release, only hardcore fans would watch it, alluding to the idea that technically it also failed in the eyes of fans. Possibly. I haven't found anything concrete about that line other than some obscure, internet comments and stuff that probably have never actually even seen the movie, so at bare minimum, the movie just kind of flopped, I guess, money-wise. To be honest, and to give my own opinion here, the movie doesn't look bad. From at least we can hear from the soundtrack and stuff, at least from what was previously shown in the OVA, it might have been good, possibly. And not to mention Sold Out was apparently gonna do the ending credits, so they were on the track too, and a lot of JoJo fans really like Sold Out, so I don't really know. To give my personal thoughts on it, I don't think it's gonna be bad if it ever gets released. But to play devil's advocate here, the film is only 90 minutes trying to cover over 44 chapters, so there could be a few problems, and this is pre-2010 anime kind of community, so it could be, the whole people not liking changes or filler to any sort of content, so that also could have led to why this movie did bad. Who knows? But you're probably saying to yourself, Metas, this couldn't be the only reason why this movie has never seen a release outside of theaters. Yeah, I know. Welcome to the Looney Tunes ass turn we're about to take. In May of 2008, both Studio App and Shueisha halted OVA and manga shipments of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure after a complaint has been launched backlash against them from the Egyptian Islamic fundamentalists after noticing Dio reading the Quran with his confrontation with Whole Horse, causing Viz Media and Shueisha to cease publication for almost a near year. And changes to the manga had to be made by Araki himself, depicting mosques as being destroyed and eventually being just swapped out by random buildings. While the manga's release in America would go as normal, selling of the OVA has been permanently cancelled. The controversy was so bad at one point the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs had to address the issue in an official report. On May 23, 2008 by the Japanese Times, one of the fundamentalists would even say this is an insult to the religion and all the producers would be considered enemies of Islam. While I do want to make a joke here, I'm not going to, as I don't want to step on any toes of anybody here. Needless to say, Studio App got into some pretty big trouble. Not only that, they were having financial issues trying to distribute the OVA at this time as well. So overall, technically in the eyes of Shueisha, Studio App was not doing well at all, having a bad movie release on top of the fact of being criticized by fundamentalists, on top of just not doing financially well, is kind of bad. And while yes, it was planned for this movie to get an official DVD release, it never happened. I fucking wonder why. Bad business is all I have to say for at least this part of the video. I would also like to note this is a pretty common thing for animation studios to do, just to use religious symbolism in their animation for whatever reason without actually taking any prior knowledge into why they're putting it in. I'm looking at you, Evangelion. So what happens when a movie with a limited theatrical release, any material or any quotes after the fact never getting released, what happens when the fans get a hold of it? Well, you get some really crazy fan interpretations of things. So for whatever reason, a lot of fans, and I mean a really gross amount of fans, really think Araki hated this movie. Shocker. It doesn't exist. There is no quote from an official source that actually says Araki hates this movie because Speedwagon was cut from it. This has to be one of the most wildest things I have ever seen in anime and manga history. Dog, what? While I do understand the whole Speedwagon is best character meme, to a certain degree it is true Araki does like him, but to straight up just lie and just make some bullshit up like this is crazy. There's not even an official source saying what Araki thinks of the movie, like genuinely after watching it. On top of that, there's also this idea that Araki hated it so much he wanted all copies burnt. That's not how this works here, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to explain that. While yes, an author's word is taken into account when directing these movies or trying to make something, they like to ask the author a lot of things, but the author doesn't have the almighty power to stop production because they say no. There is a lot of legal stuff that would have to be involved if an author were to go AWOL on a project. Shueisha would have been all over his ass and it would have been a heyday. There would be some type of legal anything that would have been officially written down that a JoJo fan would have found by now. And since there isn't any, and it's been almost near 2 decades since this event, there's nothing. So no, Araki didn't hate this movie at all. We don't even know if he really actually liked it. And he doesn't have the almighty power to stop production of this movie. While it does suck that Speedwagon's role was cut from a majority of this movie only to be a villain and not to go through his whole transformation of being kind of the steward of Jonathan Joestar to eventually make the Speedwagon Foundation, as this, to our knowledge, was supposed to be a solo movie, but we'll get to that here in a bit, does suck. But if you think this movie is absolutely unwatchable because, you know, Speedwagon wasn't there for his intended role, I'm gonna be honest, man, it's a movie. It's only 90 minutes. They had to cut some stuff out. Let bygones be bygones. We don't even know what the movie's actually truly like. So with the misinformation out of the way, I would like to actually give you a true fact here. Apparently, through concept art, a battle tendency movie was planned, at least in the early stages. I don't really know what else to say. It only exists in concept. So that's a thing to take out of this. Apparently, this actually might have been, you know, planning to eventually lead into more films in the future. Note, I want to add a question mark and an asterisk next to that because that's total fan speculation on my part. So, you failed, like, big time. The OVA kind of didn't do very well. You know, it was good enough, I guess, but the movie flopped. You had some controversy there. How do you kind of start a franchise like this? Like, this is like fresh off like the press of the manga into some animation, you know, to actually get the series going, and you just kind of fall flat on your face with no hope of actually getting anywhere because Clearly you can't run. But how I've kind of described this, it seems kind of like an underdog story. And when the franchise needed it most, in the fourth quarter of the goddamn game, came in David Productions swinging in with the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure anime adaptation. And holy shit, to say this is a win is an understatement, dog. Not only did we get an official adaptation of the first part of the series, we got 6 of them. On top of that, the internet was in love with this franchise. We did a complete 180 here. The movie failed, the OVA failed to at least a certain degree, to all of a sudden literally being everywhere, especially in the West. David Productions just got it right, dude. I can't really describe it any way else. They just did it right. And if the rumors are true that the hardcore audience just didn't like the movie for whatever reason, give your explanation here. Why I feel like that is it just wasn't JoJo's. You feel me? While Hayama is an extremely talented artist, it's two fists of the North Star. When I look at the trailers that have been leaked online, thanks to a numerous amounts of people trying to find this movie, it just doesn't look like JoJo's. It looks like Fist of the North Star. And David Productions on their end completely went full JoJo's with all of it, which I personally think led to its success. Now, Hayama is a massive JoJo's fan. He has made a lot of JoJo's art that I would pay a ludicrous amount of money for. It just honestly seems like there was a lot going against him and just the crew and cast in general. In a weird way, you can parallel the stories of all of this. You know, Studio App kind of being Jonathan and how he failed against Dio to eventually allowing a successor to eventually beat the system and make the series popular, that being David Productions, maybe kind of being similar to Jotaro in this scenario, which is really weird. I don't know, maybe life imitates art here could be said, but I don't know, maybe that's just me rapidly speculating where a pattern shouldn't be, seen. And a massive shout out to the people who have been trying to piece this movie together for years, trying to find leaks, archives of the trailers and stuff and everything. Like, while parts of this movie have been found, it has not been found in its entirety. Maybe roughly 30 minutes of the actual film have been found, but it's not in good quality and it's just kind of pixelated. While some stuff actually does look good, it's overall just not finished and not complete. Until I get the movie in its entirety on my screen, that's when I'll be happy. And I guess the last question, I guess maybe a few of you have, will we ever get an official release of this movie in, 2022 or going on forward? Probably not, and that's sad to say. Studio App got the Japanese government to say, "Ayo, my bad, we won't do that ever again," in an official statement. So it has left a burn or a mark on the franchise and Shueisha in general. And to release it now during the hype of a franchise still going to this day would kind of be bad, because it would, relive old memories that I don't think a company or a franchise wants to live again. The only chances of this movie actually being released is probably illegally through to a leak. That's the only way we're probably gonna get it, honestly. And that's the sad truth of it. But I do hope there is a good ending to Hayama's story, as he's shown at least recently that he does want the movie to be released, and if it does somehow manage its way onto the internet somehow, I think he finally could get a happy ending. Well, that's going to be the end of the video. Like, comment, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, stay hydrated. I love covering this lore stuff. It's honestly hyper fascinating for me. But anyway, have a good rest of your day or night. I don't know. Bye.